Lord Jesus, what the hell is that in this baby's head? The scissors clattered to the marble floor with a sharp clang as Anita Green stumbled back, her heart jackhammering inside her chest. Her eyes stayed fixed on the small, raised bump just above the nape of little Peter Callahan's neck. It was subtle, hidden beneath a thick wave of golden hair. But the moment she touched it, the boy had screamed. Not a childish yelp or a flinch, no. He had howled. Full-bodied. Shrill. Like an animal caught in a trap. Anita reached out instinctively to steady him. But Peter curled into himself on the padded stool, arms locked around his head, shaking. His thin shoulders trembled like dry leaves. She'd seen pain before she'd watched her own boy wither in a hospital bed, but this wasn't illness. This was fear. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you," Anita whispered, crouching beside him. "Shh now." Before she could finish, the double doors burst open. 2 guards, large men in suits, armed, tense, rushed inside, followed by the chief house manager, breathless and red-faced. And then came Robert Callahan. He swept into the room like a storm, polished shoes, gray suit, eyes sharp enough to slice a man open. He took in the scene, his only child writhing on the floor, and the new black maid crouched beside him. It took him less than a second to choose a villain. "What the hell did you do to my son?" Callahan roared, stomping toward Anita. Anita held up both hands, palms open. Sir, I didn't do nothing wrong. I was just trimming his hair like Mrs. Robbins told me, and I touched something strange on his head, and he just started screaming." Callahan grabbed her by the arm and yanked her upward so hard her shoulder cracked. "You touched him? With what? Those dirty hands?" "Sir, please don't listen to me, I swear." But Peter's agonized screaming drowned her out. His body jerked again, slamming against the bench. He let out a panicked gasp, struggling to breathe. Callahan's voice rose into a fury Anita had only ever heard in men who'd forgotten they were fathers. "You disgusting little liar. You laid your hands on him. You hurt him. You think you can come into my home and put your filthy nails into my boy?" Her eyes widened. "No. Sir, I didn't hurt him. I was gentle as a lamb. I swear on my mama's grave." Callahan's open hand struck her cheek so fast she didn't see it coming. The slap exploded across her face, sending a bright burst of light through her vision. She fell sideways, hitting her shoulder on the marble floor. The guards froze. Peter screamed again. "Get up!" Callahan bellowed. "Don't you dare crouch on my floor like a rat." Anita pushed herself halfway upright, cheek burning, eyes stinging with tears she refused to shed. "Mr. Callahan, please, I ain't hurt that child. Something's wrong with his head. I felt something, like metal or a bump," he screamed. "He needs help." "You think I'm stupid?" Callahan snarled. He grabbed the front of her uniform and jerked her closer, his face inches from hers, breath hot with rage. "You're fired. And you're lucky I don't have you arrested for assault. Guards, get her out of here." "No, please," Anita cried. "Look at him. Look at Peter. Something's under his skin, sir. Please, for God's sake, just listen." But Callahan shoved her backward. She hit the wall hard, pain shooting down her spine. The older guard moved toward her but hesitated. "Sir, maybe we should." "Lock her in the north guest room," Callahan snapped. "No windows. Take her phone. She doesn't leave until I say so." "It is Anita's eyes widened with horror. "Sir, no. Please. I'm telling the truth. I didn't hurt him. I swear I didn't hurt that boy." Her voice cracked as the guards grabbed her by both arms. Peter, still convulsing, managed a hoarse, broken whisper. "Stop. Don't hurt her." Callahan didn't hear it or pretended not to. Anita struggled, legs scraping against the marble as she was dragged toward the hall. "Mr. Callahan, look at him. I didn't do this. Something's in that baby's head. Please don't do this." But Callahan only knelt beside his son, shaking fingers combing through blonde curls, trembling with panic. "It's okay, son. Daddy's here. Daddy's here," Peter whimpered, a tiny, terrified sound. The guards yanked Anita through the door. "No, sir, please listen to me. I didn't hurt him, he screamed before I even—" The door slammed behind her, cutting off her voice. Silence swallowed the hallway except for her ragged breathing. The guards dragged her down the corridor toward the isolated north room, cold, unused, a storage space repurposed for punishment. She stumbled, feet slipping over the polished floor. "Please," she begged. "I ain't a threat. I ain't done nothin'. That child is in pain, something real wrong with his head." The younger guard swallowed hard. "Ma'am, orders are orders." They locked her inside. Anita collapsed to her knees in the dark, clutching her throbbing cheek. Her entire body trembled, but worst of all was the memory Peter's curled body, his screams, the terror in his eyes. She pressed her forehead to the cold wall, whispering, "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I couldn't help you." And then, through the stillness, she remembered his tiny, trembling hand brushing her wrist before she was dragged away, and the soft, desperate whisper, "Please, don't leave." She inhaled shakily. "I ain't leavin', baby," she whispered back into the darkness, as if he could hear her. "I ain't leavin' till I find out what they did to you. If this broke your heart too, tap like, and drop your city in the comments. You never know who nearby is watching this with you." The room was dark, save for a narrow slit of moonlight slicing across the hardwood floor. Anita Green sat motionless on the edge of the stiff guest bed, her arms wrapped around herself like armor. Her left cheek still throbbed where Robert Callahan's hand had landed, a dull ache that pulsed with every heartbeat. But that wasn't the worst pain. The worst was the humiliation, the betrayal, the helplessness. She had tried to help his boy, tried to tell him the truth, and he had called her a liar, a rat, and struck her like one. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. She couldn't afford to. Crying would only take energy she needed to stay alert. They had locked her in here without a phone. No windows, and only one door with a deadbolt she couldn't reach from the inside. The silence was so complete, it made her ears ring. She pressed her fingertips to the place on her scalp where her late son Tyler used to curl her hair and hum lullabies when he was sick. She hadn't thought of that boy in a long time. Too painful. But Peter's scream, Lord, it was the same sound. That kind of agony didn't come from nowhere. That kind of fear, there had to be a cause. Anita stood slowly, walked to the corner where she'd thrown her apron after the guards shoved her in. She knelt, feeling around until her fingers brushed soft cotton. She pulled it close, heart racing. Tucked inside the corner of the folded apron was a small floral handkerchief. She opened it gently. There it was, still clinging to a single blonde hair, a tiny, curved sliver of metal. Anita stared at it. It was no scab, no dandruff. It shimmered faintly in the moonlight like a tooth from something not meant to be inside a child's head. "Don't worry, baby," she whispered to the darkness. "Miss Anita gon' get you some help." On the other side of the estate, chaos had settled into a heavy silence. Robert Callahan sat beside Peter's bed in the boy's private suite, his fists clenched on his knees. Peter had stopped seizing but was now curled beneath the thick covers, pale and shaking. His eyes fluttered open every few minutes, only to drift shut again, dazed and glassy. Callahan had dismissed the in-house physician after being told, once again, it was just another migraine episode, possibly aggravated by stress. "Stress," Callahan growled under his breath. "That woman nearly killed him." The doctor had merely shrugged, already used to these episodes. The migraines had started around Peter's 6th birthday, sudden, violent, and untraceable. Neurologists had offered dozens of tests, even recommended sedatives, but no one had ever given him answers, just words, fancy language, and pills that didn't work. He reached forward and brushed his son's hair back from his forehead. Peter flinched. Callahan paused. He leaned closer. "It's okay, son. I'm here." Peter's lips parted. He whispered something too faint to hear. Callahan leaned even closer. "What was that, buddy?" Peter blinked slowly, then muttered, "She didn't hurt me. Is white." Callahan's chest tightened. "What?" She tried to help. Callahan straightened slowly. A cold, heavy feeling settled in his stomach. The next morning, Anita was startled awake by the sound of a key turning in the lock. The door creaked open, and Mrs. Robbins, the head housekeeper, slipped inside with a thermos and a warm towel. "Don't talk," Robbins said quietly. "I can't stay long." Anita sat up, disoriented but alert. "Please, just tell me how Peter is." "He's stable. Had another seizure last night. Dr. Wentham gave him sedatives." Anita swallowed hard. "He's not having seizures just 'cause. There's something inside his scalp." "I felt it." Robbins nodded slowly, glancing toward the door. "I believe you," she whispered. "But Mr. Callahan, he's not in a place to hear that. Not now." Anita's voice cracked. "He hit me. I know. I tried to help. I know that too." Robbins handed her the towel and a change of clothes. "Wash up. Eat something. I'll leave the door unlocked tonight. If you want to leave, go. No one will stop you." Anita stared at her. "And if I don't?" Robbins's gaze softened. "Then be careful. You're closer to the truth than anyone else has ever been." Later that day, Callahan stood at the back of his estate's private lab, a stark white room lined with diagnostic equipment he hadn't used in years. The hair sample had been brought to him in a sealed glass slide by one of his personal tech consultants, a man who owed him too many favors to ask questions. "You said you found this in your son's hair?" the consultant asked, peering at the microscope. "I didn't. The maid did." The consultant paused. "Well, whoever found it, they have sharp eyes." Callahan crossed his arms. "What is it?" The man adjusted the lens. "It's not organic. This is metal. Probably an alloy. Too fine for a splinter. Looks manufactured. For what purpose?" He looked up. "I don't know yet. But it's not natural. And it wasn't implanted recently. Judging by the hair follicle around it, that thing's been inside his scalp for a while." Callahan's mind reeled. "Since when?" The man shrugged. "Could be years." The room swam around him. Years. All the doctors, all the tests, all the pain Peter had endured. And the only person who'd found it was the maid he had locked up like a criminal. He left the lab without another word. That night, Anita was still in her room when the doorknob turned again. This time, it wasn't Mrs. Robbins. It was Callahan. He stepped inside slowly. Eyes shadowed. Face unreadable. Anita stood. "I ain't got nothing more to say to you." He didn't answer right away. He looked down at his shoes, then at the bruise still blooming faintly on her cheek. "I found what you tried to show me." Anita said nothing. "It's metal, some kind of microtech. Nobody noticed it before." His voice cracked just slightly. "You were right." She looked at him, her face stone. He stepped forward. "I overreacted. I made a mistake." She narrowed her eyes. "A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. You beat me down and locked me up like a dog." Callahan flinched. "I can't undo that. But I need your help." Anita folded her arms. "Why should I help a man who only listens when it's too late?" "Because Peter asked for you." That stopped her cold. "He hasn't spoken to anyone since the seizure. But this morning, he said one thing." "What was that?" she asked, breath caught in her chest. He said, "Tell her I'm still scared." Anita's eyes filled, but she blinked them dry. Slowly, she walked to the nightstand and pulled open the drawer. She lifted the floral handkerchief, unfolded it, and showed him the tiny piece of metal still stuck to the root of Peter's hair. "You ain't seen scared yet," she said quietly. "But I'll help you. Not for you. For that baby." Callahan nodded, and for the first time in years, he whispered, "Thank you." The hallway outside Peter Callahan's bedroom was dim, lit only by a single wall sconce whose golden light spilled softly across the carpeted floor. The mansion had that strange late-evening quiet, the kind that felt too controlled, too deliberate, as if the walls themselves were trying not to disturb the fragile peace inside the room. Robert Callahan stood just outside the door, one hand on the knob, gathering the courage he never used to need. In the early years, he'd walk into his son's room, freely lifting him after naps, tickling his belly until the boy squealed, rocking him through midnight fevers with the tenderness only a father could know. But the last few years had turned him into a spectator, watching his own son suffer with no answers. He wasn't even sure Peter wanted him inside. Not anymore. He opened the door anyway. The room was large, larger than any child could possibly need, with navy wallpaper and tall windows draped in heavy velvet. A nightlight in the shape of a lighthouse glowed softly beside the bed, its rotating beam cutting slow, gentle arcs across the ceiling. On any other night, the scene might have felt peaceful. Tonight, it felt like a tomb. Peter lay curled beneath the covers, small and fragile, his breathing shallow. His hair, normally smooth, perfectly brushed by someone paid to do so, was now tangled from the seizure and the panic earlier in the day. Callahan approached the bed quietly. "Peter," he whispered, sitting at the edge. The boy's eyelids fluttered. He let out a soft groan. Callahan exhaled shakily. "Buddy, I'm here. Daddy's here." For a moment, the boy didn't respond. Then, just barely, he turned his head to the side. His voice came out cracked, hoarse. It hurts. Daddy." Zest. Callahan's throat tightened. I know, kiddo. We're going to fix it. I promise." Peter's small hand emerged from beneath the blankets. With great effort, he lifted it, hovering blindly in the space between them. Callahan caught it, cradling it with both of his. Peter breathed out a tremor. "Where's Miss A?" Callahan froze. He had expected fear, pain, confusion. He hadn't expected that. "She didn't hurt me," Peter whispered. She tried to help." The man felt the truth land in his chest like a stone dropped in deep water. All the anger he'd unleashed earlier at Anita, at the guards, at himself returned in a heavy wave of shame. "I know, son," he murmured. "I know now." Peter blinked weakly. Tears slipped out from the corners of his eyes, trailing down to the pillow. They touched. "The spot again," the boy whispered. It felt like fire. Callahan felt a chill settle into his bones. The doctors had never described anything like this. Migraines, yes. Sensitivity to light, yes. But the way Peter described the pain, burning, sharp, triggered by the slightest touch, was nothing like the diagnoses he'd been given. Something was wrong. Something none of the experts had caught. Something Anita Green had sensed in seconds. He squeezed his son's hand. "I'm going to get you help, Peter. Real help." Peter's lips parted. "Don't let them touch me again." Anna was. "I won't," Callahan said, voice breaking. "I swear it." The boy's breathing steadied, then slowed as he drifted back into sleep. Callahan sat there, holding his hand long after the lighthouse nightlight made a full rotation across the ceiling. When he finally stood, he walked out of the room. Not as a billionaire, not as a man with power, not as someone hiding behind steel gates and security details. He walked out as a father who had failed and knew he couldn't fail again. Down the hall, in the dim guest quarters, Anita Green was wide awake. She sat on the edge of the stiff bed, the small floral handkerchief spread across her lap. Her fingertips traced the tiny curved piece of metal, still clinging to the blonde hair root, with the care of someone handling a newborn. She replayed every moment from the day in her mind. The scream, the seizure, the slap, the dragging, the lock clicking shut. She'd lived through humiliation before, but this one stung differently. She had been punished for seeing the truth. And yet, here she was, in the mansion of a man who could buy and sell half the state, forced to navigate secrets that smelled of something far darker than a medical condition. A faint creak sounded outside her door. Anita stiffened. The doorknob turned. The door eased open, not abruptly like before, but slowly, almost gently. Callahan stepped inside. He looked older than he had that morning. Tired. Shaken. His pride was still there, but something else had joined it. Humility. Guilt. "Miss Green," he said softly. Anita didn't stand. "You want to hit me again?" He winced. "I deserve that." "You deserve more than that," she said quietly. "But I ain't the judge." Callahan nodded, taking a step forward. "Peter told me you tried to help him." That baby screamed like someone was drilling into his skull. Any fool with eyes could see something wrong. "And I didn't see," Callahan murmured. "You ain't looking," Anita replied. He swallowed, hands clasped in front of him. "I've made mistakes. Many. But my son, he's all I have left. And I need to fix this." He slowly sank into the chair across from her. I need your help. Anita looked down at the metal sliver. I found something inside his scalp. Callahan leaned forward. Show me. She lifted the handkerchief, opening it with care. The shard was small, barely visible, but under the bedroom lamp, its surface gleamed with unmistakable precision. Callahan's breath hitched. God, it ain't normal, Anita said. Ain't natural either. No. His voice hardened. It's manufactured. Deliberate. Anita looked up, eyes steely. And someone put it there. A long silence settled between them. Finally, Callahan spoke. We're going to get answers. We, she echoed. He nodded. You saw what no doctor ever did, and my son trusts you. I won't ignore that again. Anita studied him carefully. She didn't trust him, not fully. But she trusted the child. And she trusted what she'd felt under her fingertips. You want the truth? She said. Then I'm with you. But on one condition. Name it. You lay a hand on me again, I walk, and you'll never see me nor the truth again. Callahan lowered his head. You have my word. Is C. Lee's. For the first time since she'd arrived at the Callahan estate, Anita saw something real in his eyes. Not power, not threat, not grief alone, but fear. Deep, genuine fear. Something had been done to his son, something monstrous. And now, they were both trapped inside a secret too big to ignore. Callahan rose to his feet. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start digging. As he opened the door, Anita called after him quietly. Mr. Callahan. He paused. She closed the handkerchief gently. Whatever's in that boy's head, it ain't a migraine. Callahan's jaw clenched. No, it's something far worse. He closed the door behind him. Morning broke over the Callahan estate, with a silence that felt manufactured, too still, too crisp, as if the house itself were holding its breath. The sun spilled through the tall windows, casting thin golden lines across the marble floors and pristine furniture. But beneath the calm, tension simmered like a pot about to boil. Anita Green stood at the kitchen counter, pouring herself a cup of coffee from the industrial-grade machine that gleamed like a mirror. The cook staff was gone. Callahan had dismissed them all for the day. Too many ears, too many eyes. This morning, only the housekeeper Robbins was allowed inside the inner circle, and even she was sworn to silence. Anita brought the cup to her lips but didn't drink. Her hands were steady. Her mind was not. Her thoughts kept returning to Peter's scream, the raw panic in it, the kind that no child should ever know. Then to the tiny shard of metal still wrapped in her handkerchief, now sealed inside a plastic specimen bag Callahan had provided from one of his secure storage rooms. It rested in her coat pocket like a burning secret. She turned as footsteps approached. Callahan entered, dressed not in his usual tailored suit, but in a soft black sweater and jeans, still expensive, but less like armor. He looked like a man prepared to face a storm, or perhaps one who had finally admitted there was one. You ready? He asked. Anita nodded. I've been ready. They didn't speak as they walked the hallway to Peter's room, but as they neared the door, she stopped. I need to ask you something first, she said. Callahan turned to face her. How long has he been complaining of headaches? He hesitated. Since he was 6. Did he fall? Hit his head? No, nothing like that. At least, not that I know of. Any surgeries? None. Not since his birth. Anita squinted at him. And you still ain't asked no one to check under his scalp? I did, he snapped. MRI, CT scans, everything. They said it was neurological. Migraines, cluster headaches. I hired the best in Boston, New York, D. Anita shook her head slowly. They looked in his brain, but they didn't see him. Callahan said nothing. She looked him square in the eye. We do this my way now. He nodded once. They opened the door together. Peter was awake, lying still beneath his blankets, one small hand clutching the edge of a stuffed bear worn down by years of comfort. His blonde hair was brushed neatly again, Mrs. Robbins, no doubt. When he saw Anita, his face lit up faintly. Miss A, he whispered. Her chest ached at the sound of it. She crossed the room and knelt beside his bed, taking his small hand in hers. Hey there, baby. You feelin' okay this mornin'? Peter nodded, but his eyes flicked toward his father. uncertainty written across his pale features. Callahan stepped forward slowly. Peter, Miss Anita's gonna look at your head again. But this time, I'll be right here. You don't have to be scared. Okay. Peter hesitated, then gave a small nod. Can I sit you up, sugar? Anita asked gently. Another nod. She adjusted his pillows and helped him sit. His body was thin, too thin for a boy his age, and the tremble in his fingers didn't go unnoticed. Anita reached for the small towel she had tucked into her apron, gently parting his hair at the base of his skull. Her fingers moved slowly, with care and reverence, like she was touching something sacred. Then, she saw it again. The bump. It was no bigger than a marble, nestled just above the hairline behind his right ear, barely visible. But now, up close, she saw more. There was a scar, thin, faded, expertly hidden. Anita sucked in a breath. You see something? Callahan asked. She nodded. This ain't just a bump. Somebody went in here. This was cut open, Peter whimpered. I'm sorry, baby, she whispered. Almost done. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small penlight Robbins had slipped to her earlier. She clicked it on and shone it gently across the skin. The scar was perfect, surgical even, but it was old. Whoever did this, she murmured. They knew how to hide it. Callahan crouched beside her, eyes locked on the small ridge of skin. My God, he whispered. You're right. Peter clutched Anita's hand tighter. Callahan stood abruptly. I need to make a call. To who? She asked. To a man I used to do business with. He owed me favors, deep favors. He used to design microchips for military intelligence. If anyone can tell us what this is, it's him. Is the Prast. He left the room without waiting for her response. Anita stayed. She stroked Peter's hand gently. You're so brave, baby. So strong. We gon' get to the bottom of this. You hear me? Peter looked up at her. I dreamed I was a robot. Her breath caught. I couldn't move, he whispered. And there were lights in my eyes. Tears threatened at the corners of Anita's eyes, but she blinked them back. That's no dream, baby. That's your body trying to remember. Oh. Later that day, in the private study at the back of the estate, Callahan paced in front of a secure laptop, waiting for a connection to load. Anita stood at the door, arms folded. The call connected. A man's voice, rough and electronic, came through. Robert, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I need a favor, Callahan said. Off the record. Immediate. He reached for the plastic bag Anita had provided and held it up to the webcam. You recognize this? The man on the other end squinted. Looks like a microchip sliver, not civilian grade. Military? Could be. Or black market tech. Where'd it come from? Callahan hesitated. My son's scalp. A long silence. Send me a better image. The voice finally said. And Robert, be careful. If someone put that in a child without your consent, you're not just dealing with doctors. You're dealing with ghosts. Callahan ended the call, face pale. He turned to Anita. We need answers. And fast. Anita nodded. Then stop pacing and start digging. The following morning brought no peace to the Callahan estate. The skies outside had turned gray, as if the clouds themselves were watching the house. Uneasy. Inside the study, Robert Callahan sat hunched over a second monitor, the light from the screen casting sharp shadows across his face. His phone buzzed once. Incoming encrypted video call. He accepted it immediately. The man on the screen was older, bearded, and wore a sweatshirt instead of a suit. Martin Decker, a former engineer who'd once designed surveillance microchips for U.S. military intelligence, the kind of man who only answered to private numbers and buried his work in government black sites. What do you have? Callahan asked, not wasting a second. Martin leaned forward. That sliver from your son's scalp? That's not just a chip. That's part of a neural tracking device. Callahan's blood ran cold. Tracking? Martin nodded. And monitoring. Behavioral patterns, location, even possible stimulation. Whatever this came from, it was designed to interface with the nervous system. Callahan clenched his jaw. How old is this tech? Martin hesitated. It's Classified level stuff. Early prototypes started showing up around 7 or 8 years ago. That lines up with Peter's first seizures, Callahan muttered under his breath. Martin lowered his voice. You need to understand something, Robert. This was embedded without your knowledge. Someone accessed your son. That means someone got through your security, your people, your systems. Callahan stood, trembling with rage. I sent the chip sample to a clean lab in Toronto, Martin added. They'll run deeper scans. But you've got a bigger problem now. What? Find out who had access to Peter between the ages of 4 and 6. That's likely when it was implanted. Someone close. Someone invisible. Meanwhile, in the staff wing, Anita stood alone in the laundry room, folding sheets with mechanical precision. Her hands moved automatically, but her mind was elsewhere, back in Peter's room, in the scar behind his ear, and in the child's whisper about lights in his eyes. The boy wasn't just in pain. He was being used like her own boy had once been by systems that valued data over lives and silence over truth. She paused, eyes drifting to the wall clock. Almost noon. Peter would be awake by now. She left the laundry cart and made her way down the corridor to the child's suite, knocking softly before entering. He was sitting up this time, propped against a pile of pillows, a book open in his lap. His eyes lit up when he saw her. Miss A, he smiled, weak but warm. Hey baby, how you feeling today? Not dizzy, not yet. She sat beside him and gently tucked a napkin under his collar, then reached for the bowl of oatmeal Mrs. Robbins had left on the nightstand. As she spooned him a bite, she whispered, You remember anyone touching your head when you were real little? Maybe at the hospital? Peter frowned, chewing slowly. I remember white coats, lights. I was scared. They told me not to cry. Anita's heart sank. They say why you were there. He shook his head. I used to dream about it. But Daddy says dreams aren't real. She stroked his hair. Sometimes dreams are how truth sneaks through when no one's listening. He nodded, trusting her more than any adult in his life. That afternoon, Callahan summoned Anita to the study. The moment she entered, she saw the fury barely restrained in his posture. They implanted it years ago, he growled. Without my consent. Without my knowledge. She folded her arms. Who's they? He handed her a list of names. Nannies, private tutors, pediatricians, therapists, all individuals who had access to Peter before he turned 7. Anita scanned the list. You trust any of these people? I trusted all of them, he spat. Now I trust no one. Her eyes landed on one name. This one. Dr. Ellen Kaiser. Behavioral neurologist? Callahan nodded. Saw Peter when he was 5. Said he had sensory processing disorder. Gave him meds. Anita squinted. She ever see him alone? Callahan thought for a moment. Yes, in her private clinic. In Georgetown. She handed the list back. Start there. By evening, Callahan had called in a private investigator, ex-military, off books. Meanwhile, Anita returned to Peter's room. The boy was asleep again, his tiny fingers curled around the same stuffed bear he never let go of. As she adjusted his blanket, she noticed something tucked between the mattress and the wall, a small plastic ring. She pulled it out slowly, a toy, but not one she'd ever seen around the house. When she turned it over, her breath caught. Engraved beneath the smooth surface was a tiny company logo, Dynacore Analytics. She remembered it from somewhere, an article she once read years ago, about a startup that partnered with pediatric hospitals to study neurological development in children, experimental programs, medical surveillance. Funded by defense grants, Anita stared at the toy for a long moment. Someone had left a breadcrumb. She rose, gently kissed Peter's forehead, and whispered, We're gonna follow this trail, baby. I promise you. Then she turned and walked out of the room. The war had begun. The black SUV rolled through the rain-soaked streets of Arlington, Virginia, its tinted windows keeping its passengers hidden from the world. Robert Callahan sat in the back seat, jaw clenched, one hand tapping against his knee in a rhythm that betrayed his inner chaos. Beside him, Anita Green stared out the window, her fingers tightening around the small plastic ring she'd found in Peter's bed just hours earlier. The ring was now sealed in a plastic evidence pouch, its engraved company name unmistakable. Dynacore Analytics. You sure this is the place? Anita asked without turning. Callahan nodded. It matches the address listed in the Department of Health archives. Dynacore's old headquarters. They supposedly shut down 5 years ago. IM said. Supposedly, she muttered. The SUV pulled to a stop outside a squat, nondescript brick building with faded signage and weeds growing through the cracks in the sidewalk. No guards, no cameras. Just dust and silence. Anita stepped out first, holding her coat tight against the wind. Callahan followed, his steps heavy. They approached the main door, which had been left ajar, a bad sign. But Callahan pushed it open anyway. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and paper rot. Rows of filing cabinets lined the back wall, many drawers still half open, contents yellowing and curling with age. A broken fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Looks like someone packed in a hurry, Anita said. They split up, moving carefully through the space. Anita scanned desk drawers and filing cabinets. Callahan checked the adjacent offices, calling out names he found on old plaques. Lab A. Evaluation room. Patient observation. Then, Anita froze. Mr. Callahan, she said quietly. He returned to her side. She held up a file folder marked Callahan Protocol, Case 0142P. They opened it together. Inside was a printed intake form dated 7 years ago, with Peter's full name and medical information. Attached was a digital scan of an authorization document with Callahan's signature. That's a fake, he growled. Anita pointed to the fine print. They forged consent, said you approved experimental neuromapping for behavioral correction. His hands shook. I never signed this. Never even heard of this program. There were graphs, neural patterns, developmental charts, and a single, chilling note scrawled in red ink at the bottom. Phase 2 implant successful. Subject stable. Recommend silent monitoring. Anita's stomach turned. They'd been using him, like a lab rat. Suddenly, a noise echoed from the back of the building. A creak, then a soft thud. Callahan motioned for silence. He pulled a small pistol from inside his coat. Anita's eyes widened. You carry a gun to a file room? I carry a gun everywhere now, he said coldly. They crept down the hall toward the noise, passing old medical equipment and disassembled chairs. At the end of the corridor, the records room door was slightly ajar. Callahan pushed it open. Inside stood a man, middle-aged, gaunt, wearing a lab coat that hadn't been white in years. His eyes were sunken, hands trembling as he held a stack of dusty folders. He startled when he saw them. I don't want any trouble, he stammered. I'm just cleaning up. Who are you? Callahan demanded. Name's Lawrence. I used to work here. I came back to grab personal files before they shut power off completely. Anita stepped forward. You worked with kids? Lawrence hesitated. I did data analysis, pattern tracking. I didn't implant anything. Did you work on the Callahan case? Callahan asked, voice low. Lawrence froze. Anita pulled out the folder. Recognize this? His eyes went wide. I wasn't part of the field team, he said quickly. That was all Dr. Ellen Kaiser. She handled the trials. I only ran analytics from the other side of the firewall. I didn't touch the subjects. You knew they were children? Anita asked. He nodded, ashamed. We weren't told the full scope at first. They framed it as cognitive enrichment, you know, helping children overcome behavioral disorders. But the data streams coming back, they weren't monitoring behavior. They were controlling it. Callahan's voice turned to ice. What do you mean? Lawrence licked his lips. The implants sent signals not just out, but in. Tiny pulses. Stimuli meant to suppress certain emotional reactions. Fear, disobedience, aggression. They were trying to create compliance. Anita's breath caught. They were rewiring those kids. Lawrence nodded. Kaiser had a list of target children, sons and daughters of high-net-worth individuals. She said it was all under the table off the books, funded by a private coalition. She believed it was the future of parenting. Callahan's eyes darkened. Where is she now? No one's seen her in years, Lawrence said. She vanished when the program got shut down. took all her case notes. She's a ghost. Callahan stepped forward, menacing. Then you better help us find her. Lawrence raised his hands. There's one name I remember. She mentioned a man, Harlan Dross. Said he was her handler. She'd meet him in Chicago. That's all I know. Callahan nodded. Anita reached into her bag and pulled out a smartphone. She snapped photos of the Callahan protocol file, then tucked it back under her coat. We're done here, she said. Lawrence didn't move until they were gone. Back in the SUV, Callahan stared out the window, lost in thought. They used my son, he murmured, like a goddamn test subject. Anita was silent. Then she said, You believe me now? He turned to look at her. I believe, he said softly, that I let too many wolves through the gate. Then it's time to shut that gate, she replied, and go huntin'. He nodded. She leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. Next stop, Chicago. Chicago greeted them with a biting wind and skies the color of steel. The Callahan private jet had landed at a discreet executive terminal just after midnight, and a black sedan whisked them into the city under the veil of darkness. Anita Green sat quietly in the back seat, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar skyline as they passed the towering silhouettes of glass and stone. You ever been to Chicago? Callahan asked. Not since my boy died, she said softly, without looking at him. He glanced her way but said nothing. Some wounds deserved their silence. They were headed to the South Loop, to a run-down jazz bar called the Gilded Moth, the last known meeting place of Harlan Dross, the mysterious handler connected to Dr. Kaiser. According to Decker's contact, Dross had gone underground after Dynacor folded, but whispers of his reappearance had surfaced in the city's underworld. If anyone knew where Kaiser was, it was him. The sedan pulled into a side alley, and the driver, a quiet man named Ruiz, nodded toward the rear door. We're here, unquote. The Gilded Moth didn't look like much from the outside, peeling gold paint, flickering neon, and the faint hum of saxophones slipping through the cracks in the windows. But inside, it pulsed with low-light, velvet booths, and the smell of bourbon and secrets. Anita walked in first, coat pulled tight, eyes sharp. She wasn't here for jazz. They found him near the back, a tall, wiry man in a dark fedora, seated alone at a corner booth, smoking a clove cigarette like it was part of his hand. He was dressed like a man who wanted to disappear. Charcoal coat, no watch, no phone, no jewelry. Just that face. Long, pale, and expressionless. Callahan slid into the booth opposite him without waiting for an invitation. Anita followed. The man didn't flinch. Harlan Dross? Callahan asked. The man exhaled smoke. Who's asking? Robert Callahan. This is Anita Green. We're here about Peter. Dross tapped ash into a small glass tray. You brought her? She's the reason your damn experiment didn't kill him. Dross chuckled. I warned Kaiser. Said she shouldn't implant a prototype in a child that young. But she wanted results. Said the Callahan boy was perfect, clean genetics, high neural adaptability, wealthy family, isolated household, ideal subject. Callahan's fists clenched. You son of a... Anita laid a hand on his arm. Let him talk. Dross studied her, amused. You're the maid, the one who found it. Dull. Call it what you want, she said. I saw what no one else did. Dross nodded, the cigarette between his fingers crackling softly. Impressive. The unit was designed to be untraceable, buried behind the parietal ridge, almost no surface scarring. You found it by touch? Anita didn't respond. Dross leaned back. Well, now it's out, and you've set things in motion. Kaiser won't be happy. We want her location, Callahan said, voice low. Dross smiled faintly. You think I know where she is? We think if you don't tell us, you won't be breathing long enough to finish that cigarette. Anita said calmly. Dross paused. Then, slowly, he reached into his coat. Callahan tensed, but the man only pulled out a small notebook. He slid it across the table. She moves every few weeks. This was her last known safe house, up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Remote, forested, guarded. She's paranoid. Callahan opened the notebook and scanned the coordinates. What's she doing out there? Dross shrugged. Finishing her work maybe, hiding from it. Doesn't matter. You'll never get in without help. We have help, Anita said. Dross narrowed his eyes. Then you'd better be ready for what you find. Back at the hotel, Anita sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the coordinates while Callahan paced the suite behind her. The wind howled outside their 23rd-story window. "You think he's telling the truth?" she asked. "He's too scared to lie," Callahan said. "That man doesn't talk unless someone's breathing down his neck." Anita nodded. "Then we're going to Wisconsin." He stopped pacing. "It's remote. Snow's coming in. That place is probably a fortress." She turned to him. "We've come too far to stop at a fence." Callahan walked to the minibar, poured himself a whiskey, and sipped it slowly. "When this is over, if Peter's okay, I'll burn every name connected to this program to the ground." Anita stood. "Start with Kaiser, then work your way back to the men who paid her." That night, Callahan called Robbins to check on Peter. "He's been quiet," she said, "but calmer. Less pain." Callahan's voice cracked. "Tell him I love him." "I do," Robbins replied, "and so does Miss Anita." As the call ended, Anita stood by the window, watching the snow begin to fall. Somewhere in the frozen woods of Wisconsin, the woman who had carved into a child's skull without permission was still free. But not for long. The tires of the rented SUV crunched over frozen gravel as the vehicle crept through the pine-lined roads of northern Wisconsin. Heavy snow flurries danced in the air, coating the windshield in fine powder. Anita Green sat beside Robert Callahan in the front seat. Maps and surveillance images spread across her lap like a war table. "We're close," she murmured, glancing up at the dashboard GPS. Quarter mile. The woods around them were deathly quiet, no birdsong, no rustle of deer, just the whisper of the wind pushing through the branches like a warning. Somewhere beyond the tree line sat a cabin unregistered, off-grid, and according to Harlan Dross, the last known hiding place of Dr. Ellen Kaiser. Callahan adjusted his grip on the wheel. "This place is a fortress." Dross wasn't lying. "It's so why?" The structure finally emerged into view. A squat, modernist cabin of black wood and reinforced glass tucked behind a thicket of spruce. No lights, no smoke from the chimney, but the snow on the porch steps was disturbed. Someone had been in or out recently. Callahan pulled off the road, cutting the engine. They sat in silence for a moment. "You ready?" he asked. Anita stared ahead. "I've been ready since I heard that boy scream." "It's C. Jessup." They approached on foot, Anita walking low along the right flank of the trees while Callahan circled the rear. No cameras were visible, but Anita noticed thin wires embedded in the bark of several trees, infrared motion sensors. She disabled two with a pocket knife and reached the edge of the property just as Callahan reached the back deck. A rusted generator hummed faintly near the side wall. The silence was deceptive. Anita whispered through the walkie. "2 wires down. No alarms yet. And some. Back door's unlocked," Callahan replied. "Going in." They entered almost simultaneously. The inside was clinical, less like a home and more like a private lab. Stainless steel counters, lockers, a cot in the corner. One wall was lined with hard drives, another with whiteboards covered in notes written in looping cursive. In the center of the room stood a steel medical chair bolted to the floor. Anita's breath hitched. Lord have mercy. Straps still hung from the arms. Callahan moved toward the desk, sifting through folders. "These are full profiles," he muttered. "Children. Dozens." Anita picked up a photo. A boy, no older than Peter, with copper hair and freckles, smiling. On the back, scrawled in red ink, "Subject 0159. Withdrawal response successful. Memory lag observed." "They wiped him," she whispered. "They erased part of that boy." Suddenly, the floor creaked above. Anita looked up. "We're not alone." 25. Callahan signaled her silently, then headed toward the stairwell tucked beside the refrigerator. Each step creaked underfoot. Upstairs, the walls were paper-thin, the hallway tight. Anita walked slowly, her hand brushing the holster in her coat pocket. Then, from behind the door at the end of the hall, came a voice. "I figured you'd come eventually, Mr. Callahan." Callahan froze. The door opened slowly. Dr. Ellen Kaiser stood before them, older than expected, but sharp-eyed, with short silver hair and a posture too calm for a fugitive. She wore a gray turtleneck, Her sleeves rolled, her hands bare. "Did you find what you were looking for downstairs?" she asked, stepping aside. "No need to break things. I've kept everything intact." Anita's voice was cold. "You put a chip inside a baby." "I advanced human understanding," Kaiser said. "He was never supposed to feel pain. That was an error in the chip's mapping. A misfire. You cut into his skull," Callahan hissed, stepping forward. Kaiser didn't flinch. "I saved him from what he could have become. That boy was already showing signs of behavioral disorder. I gave him control." "You gave yourself control," Anita snapped. "Where are the others?" Callahan demanded. "The other children you tested on? Most of them are back with their families," Kaiser replied, eerily serene. "Improved. Obedient. The future of parenting." Callahan stepped closer. "You'll never touch another child again." "I doubt that," she said softly. "You think you can stop this?" Dynacore was only the first layer. "The people funding this are about to see their first lawsuit," Callahan cut in. "And their last." Kaiser gave a small smile. "You think exposing this will change anything? People want compliant children. Quiet children. You'll be surprised how many parents would pay for what I offer." That's because monsters like you prey on desperation," Anita said. "But not anymore." Suddenly, Kaiser moved quick, practiced. Her hand darted toward a button beneath the bookshelf, but Anita was faster. She launched forward, tackling Kaiser to the ground before her hand could connect. They hit the floor hard, the older woman grunting beneath her weight. Anita pinned her wrists, her breath sharp. "You ain't going nowhere." Doc Tan. Callahan knelt beside them, pulled zip ties from his coat, and bound Kaiser's wrists. As she sat against the wall, defeated, her voice dropped to a whisper. "It's already too late. You pulled the chip from your son, but the imprint's still there. The damage is done." Callahan stared down at her. "We'll let a courtroom decide that." "No," Anita said, standing. "We decide. Starting now." Back at the estate. 3 days later, Peter sat beside Anita on the garden bench, his little legs swinging over the edge. The scar behind his ear was healing. His eyes were brighter now, his voice stronger. "I feel lighter," he said. She smiled. "That's 'cause the storm's over, baby." "Is it?" She glanced toward the house, where Callahan stood speaking with a team of federal agents, folders of evidence in hand. "Almost," she said, "but we ain't never letting that wind through the door again." Peter reached up and took her hand. Inside, the last of the data from Kaiser's lab was being uploaded to a secure drive ready for the justice system, the press, and anyone who dared deny what had been done. This war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. 2 weeks later, the world finally began to notice. The story broke on a quiet Tuesday morning. National news networks ran the headline in block letters across screens from New York to Los Angeles. "Billionaire's son implanted with experimental neurochip without consent investigation uncovers dark child testing ring." A photo of Peter Callahan, blurred for privacy, was shown alongside images of the now infamous black ring with the Dynacore Analytics logo etched beneath it. The press was aflame. Legal pundits speculated. Advocacy groups erupted. Parents all across America looked at their children differently that day, searching their faces for secrets they hoped weren't there. And in the middle of the storm, Anita Green found herself sitting across from a seasoned reporter from 60 Minutes. She wore a navy blue blouse. Her braids were pulled back, neat and soft. Her voice calm, measured, but filled with quiet fire. The interviewer, a gray-haired man with the voice of national trust, leaned forward. "Miss Green, you were hired as a housekeeper. How did you discover the chip?" Anita exhaled slowly. "By listening, by watching, by doing what most folks in that house were too proud to do." "See that boy?" He nodded. "You're not a medical professional. And yet, you uncovered what a dozen specialists missed." "That's 'cause they weren't looking for the truth," she said. "They were looking for a label, for a fix. But Peter didn't need fixin'. He needed savin'. Nowzer. And the moment you tried," the reporter asked carefully, "you were restrained?" She nodded once. Mr. Callahan believed I hurt his son. I understand why. But belief ain't the same as truth. What kept you from walking away? Her eyes burned. That boy screamed when I touched his head. Screamed like someone touched fire. You don't walk away from that. Not if you still got a soul. Oh. Meanwhile, in the Callahan estate's private conference room, Robert Callahan sat across from two federal agents. One was from the Department of Health, the other from the DOJ. Stacks of documents filled the table, lab reports, forged consent forms, data disks smuggled from Kaiser's lab. A gold-plated USB drive sat between them. You realize the scope of what you've uncovered? Agent Benton said. I do, Callahan replied, voice gravel. But I want immunity for my staff, especially Anita Green. She's the reason we found it. She's not part of this rot. Granted, Agent Perez nodded. We've begun locating other children involved. Benton added. Some were adopted into government families. Others are still under private care. We believe the number of implanted children exceeds 200. Callahan stared at the drive. Burn it down. All of it. I don't care how deep it goes. Do. That evening, Anita returned to Peter's room, where he sat quietly, drawing dinosaurs with a pack of colored pencils she'd bought him at the store. You're on TV, he said without looking up. She raised a brow. I am? Peter nodded. Daddy said you're a hero. She chuckled. Your daddy's just now catching up. He looked at her, eyes wide and sincere. You saved me. She knelt beside him. Baby, you saved yourself. I just listened. Itakad. He reached into his sketchpad and tore out one of the drawings, a big T-Rex, with tiny arms and a heart on its chest, and handed it to her. For you, Anita smiled, tears pressing at the corners of her eyes. I'll keep it forever. Days later, as news cameras descended on federal courtrooms and legal teams began the long war of accountability, Callahan made a private call from his study. It was to Harlan Dross. You said Kaiser was the first layer, he said. I want the rest. Excess. Dross's voice crackled through the line. You sure? You pull that thread, you won't like what unravels. I don't care. Give me the names. A pause. Then, you're looking at billionaires, lobbyists, government programs. You ready to drag them into the light? Callahan's eyes narrowed. I am. Then start with Project Lucent. That's where the money came from. Click. That night, Anita stood outside beneath the stars, wrapped in a shawl, her breath visible in the chill air. Robbins came to her side, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. They said you could testify before Congress, Robbins said, smiling. I ain't got the voice for Congress, Anita replied. But I got one for Peter. That's enough. Robbins nodded. The world's finally listening. Anita looked up at the sky, remembering a time when no one did, when her own child had slipped away before anyone believed he was in danger. Now, another boy had been saved. And this time, the silence was broken. The file came in an unmarked envelope, thick paper, no return address. Just 2 words printed in small block type across the first page. Project Lucent. Robert Callahan read it alone in his study, the fireplace behind him casting dancing shadows across the pages. Anita Green sat nearby, silent, her eyes locked on his face as he turned the pages with increasing disbelief. Lucent had started almost 15 years ago, long before Dynacore. It began as a Department of Defense initiative, framed as a cognitive acceleration project for children identified as having latent leadership potential. The goal, to prepare the next generation of cognitive elites through neural enhancement. The methods, unethical, unauthorized, unforgivable. Callahan dropped the final page onto the desk. They used private children as test subjects, paid off parents, or lied to them, all under the pretense of educational advancement. Anita leaned in. Dynacore wasn't the disease, just a symptom. He nodded slowly. Lucent funneled money to private biotech startups. One of those was Dynacore. Another was Aislinn Technologies. I've heard that name in D.C. before, one of the big pharma donors no one questions. Anita sat back, arms crossed. You really think this goes all the way to the Capitol? I think it goes past it, he said. Into the veins of every system that touches our kids, schools, hospitals, even adoption centers. Her jaw clenched. That means there's more Peters. He looked her in the eyes. Hundreds. 2 days later, Callahan's legal team filed a Freedom of Information Act request against 3 federal departments. The suits were designed not to win quickly, but to send a signal. The gloves were off. In retaliation, he was served a subpoena by a pharmaceutical lobbying group linked to Aislinn, claiming slander and intentional disruption of trade. Anita read the paperwork and laughed bitterly. They trying to scare you. Callahan stared at the cease and desist order. They're gonna wish they tried harder. Back in the estate, Peter had begun speaking more. Not a flood of words, but gentle, growing confidence. With the chip gone, and his body healing, the trauma no longer gripped him like a vice. Anita helped him work on puzzles, draw, build stories. One afternoon, while sitting under the sunroom skylight, Peter asked her, "Do you think I'm normal now?" She looked at him, placing a hand on his chest. "You're not normal, baby. You're brave. You're alive. And you're whole. That's better than normal." He smiled. Then he said, "I had a dream. I was in a room full of lights, and someone kept saying, 'Stay still, stay still,' but I didn't. I ran." Anita's heart broke and healed in the same moment. That's your soul fighting back. The pressure continued to mount. News reports confirmed at least 47 children had been identified with similar implants. 3 parents had come forward with lawsuits. A whistleblower at Aislinn Technologies released a memo detailing orders from Project Lucent Central Intelligence, suggesting knowledge of the unauthorized chip testing had gone as high as the Joint Bioethics Committee. Callahan met with Senator Reed Monroe, an aging war hero turned reformer who had long railed against unchecked defense contracts. "This is your moment, Robert," Monroe said. "You want justice? The kind that sticks? Then put your money where your mouth is. Fund the hero."